Good evening and welcome to my February 2024 webinar on managing karma. Um, the last few webinars that I've given have kind of brought together what I've learned over years now of practice and learning uh, to uh, bring a sense of fulfillment, I think, to it. Although I don't expect in any sense that I'll stop learning. That just seems to be a part of the whole process of doing this work, constantly learning new things. But this webinar brings together the answers to a question which arose in my mind largely because of a series of consultations that I've been doing over the last, basically over the last year, but particularly over the last few months. Um, if you know something about astrology, you know that astrology spells out when certain things are going to happen in your life. Some of them will be good things, meaning we like them, and some of them will be what we call bad things, things we don't like, things that seem to be like punishment or trials or challenges in our existence. And so karma seems to be something because it's, so to speak, written in the stars. This is the way your life's going to go, something that doesn't really change. And yet, that didn't seem right to me in the work I was doing with people. I felt like their karma was changing. It could be something minor, for instance, if they have, and I'm going to call it minor, they have a broken bone. And I've worked with a number of people recently who've had broken bones. And, there's a superficial process of just helping to heal the fracture. And then if there seems to be something in the history or something, it's not healing properly or something, then we typically go look and see where this came from. What was the karma that produced this problem that led us into this situation where we are now dealing with a broken bone or multiple bones, or an illness or something like that that just comes upon us. Same kind of thing. We look into that. And in my work, sometimes I see where that karma is coming from. Particularly, it can maybe something from this lifetime, but often it's something that relates to a past lifetime. And when that shows up, you go like, oh, we have a pattern here that we need to clear up. Sometimes that is a familial pattern, that is, it occurs in multiple family members through multiple generations, and we can work to change that and to bring an end to that karma, that kind of action, that kind of result of action. Really is, we tend to think of things, I could clarify the terminology here, we tend to think of karma as that which comes to us, but karma actually is the action that we have engaged in that has set up a certain quality of energy or vibration in the universe that then comes back to us at a particular time that is revealed in the astrological charts. So we use karma in the word in both ways, but it really means the action that we've done. And so, it's really something, you think, well, is it fixed or is it not fixed? Well, if I can bring about some change in the person's physical or emotional or spiritual condition, then I would say it's changed, or at least we've worked out the karma. We've played that out. And so, yeah, it does seem like it's possible to change one's karma. So that question had been mulling in my mind on and off for quite a long time. And then, of course, comes the question, well, what am I really doing? What does anybody do that changes their karma? That seemed like quite a question. It's kind of mysterious in a way. If I work on a broken bone, for instance, and I produce a healing, how does that deal with the karma, right? We deals with the manifestation of the karma, but how does that change the karma? Or maybe we just pay our debt, whatever that might be, and then then it's done. So it does seem that the work I do really does change people's karma. And the question then that was kind of still stirring in my mind is, how exactly does the work that I do change the karma? I think it changes the karma. It feels like it changes the karma. It appears that way, but what exactly is it that I'm doing that brings that about? So my experience with clients over the last year has provided answers to these questions. And frankly, I'm kind of excited to share what I've come to understand about karma. Excuse me. Karma, literally action, is an age-old concept. When I say age-old, I mean early biblical times at least, and certainly also in the Eastern traditions. And the karma is actually I believe it's a Sanskrit word that's come down to us. It's now part of the English language, New Age way of talking about things that we do, things that happen to us. The basic idea is that karma sets up vibrations, our actions, which can be our thoughts too, and our feelings, set up vibrations in the universe. And we say life-supporting actions bring good fortune to us, and it comes back to us in favorable ways, things that we like, things that make us happy, things that make us feel successful in the world. While actions that we engage in that hurt ourselves or bring others some pain or discomfort or lack or suffering, they bring unhappy consequences eventually to our life. And so we tend to complain about our bad karma, as we call it, the things that are coming to us that have brought us some suffering. And I might just add right at this point even that we should look at our unhappy times as opportunities to learn from our past mistakes so that we can engage in more what is often called righteous or virtuous behavior in the future. And when I use the words righteous and virtuous, I do so because when I went back and actually reviewed some literature from, the Mahabharata and the sub part of that called the Bhagavad Gita, and actually, the Western Bible and particularly the Ten Commandments. Those, much of the discussion of karma is about righteous and virtuous behavior as opposed to unrighteous behavior. And so there's a lot of talk about sin. That's a word that's used, a great deal. And, if you read now I'm going to forget the name, that describes the interactions that people produce. A story of Job. Sorry, just slipped my mind. Been working on this for a week or more, this part of it, and reading the story of Job, which I tried to read. I'm not sure I was completely successful, so to speak, in understanding what I was reading, but I was reading the King James version of the story of Job, which is, in Old English. And it's very beautiful reading. It's very poetic, but the vocabulary and grammar are quite challenging. And so, anyway, when you read about these things, it's all about, sin. And much of the story of Job is a discussion between Job and some of his peers, who are knowledgeable people, and they bring out all different points about karma. Karma is a very complicated concept, and it's in the West we tend to say as you sow, so shall you reap, and so which literally means you just get back what you do. If the nature of what you do is good and virtuous and righteous, then life supporting is a word that we often use here. If it's beneficial to oneself and mankind and the universe, certainly the world, then we say, you get good karma, and you earn. It's like earning points. And then, of course, if you do things that are hurtful to yourself or others, you say, well, that's bad karma, and that's going to you're going to have to pay a debt. And so this sense of a debt, and which produces suffering in our life, is very, very prevalent in the ancient literature. The Ten Commandments goes back probably a couple of thousand years or more in the before Christ. And the story of Job is a kind of a contemporary story. Or no, even that's an old story. So these concepts have been written down and been available for teaching and discussion in religious circles for a very, very long time. So what is bad karma, actually? In the Mahabharata and in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the section of that story, basically the story is you have two families, and one is, we'll just keep it simple, one is righteous and the other is not. And they get to quarreling, and basically a fight develops. And Arjuna is the leader of one family, and his great dismay, he has to go out and fight his cousins, who are the members of the other family. And even his great teacher is a member of the other family. So it's a great dilemma for him. So the Bhagavad Gita is about how he goes out on the battlefield, and his charioteer, Krishna, who is basically an incarnation, hope I get this right, it's Vishnu, I believe. He teaches Arjuna why he has to fight this battle and kill his kinsman, which is at least believed to be a sin. And so there's a question about what's known as dharma or duty, or life purpose, and then action. And so the action seems to violate the rules of life, the killing people. And of course, in the Western tradition, we embodies that strongly. I'm going to look to see which commandment that is. 6. The 6th of the 10 commandments is that thou shalt not kill. So anyway, in the Mahabharata, it's this great epic about what has to happen. And so Krishna enlightens Arjuna on the battlefield, but in preparation to the battle. And then the rest of the story is that the battle takes place, and the virtuous are they prevail in the story, fortunately, or we wouldn't be here now. Anyway, it's a very complicated thing. In the story of Job, Job is difficult reading, not only because if you read it in the King James Version, as I was trying to do, which is the Old English, but it's a difficult story because of the nuances of understanding about what karma is. And you find those same nuances in the Bhagavad Gita. And so it's an intellectual exercise. And I often suggest to people that they look at the story of Job in the Bible. Any version basically will be fine. But almost nobody gets through it because the language and the philosophical points that are being made, the discussion of karma and what's happening to Job, is very, very intellectual, and it's tedious reading. And I was kind of wading through it. I was just kind of saying, "Oh, I got to keep going. I got to understand what this says." But I was going like, "Ooh, this is really, really challenging." Facing all of this, dealing with all of this, gives us a sense of where we're at, but it doesn't give us a sense of where to go. There's not much of a prescription. The usual prescription in these writings and in the teachings of faith around the world and through the millennia, is that you should pray and be humble before God and follow God's law, and virtually every religion has codified the law. They've written it down, or have an oral tradition if they don't have the writing. But the 10 Commandments, which is actually regarded as the first 10 of the 613 commandments that are in the first 5 books of the Bible, that part known as the Torah. 613 different commandments, but they're regarded as the principal ones in that the others seem to serve these first 10. And I don't want to go through all of it, but it's kind of interesting. In the Hebrew Bible, the first commandment isn't really a commandment. It's I am the Lord your God, usually translated as thy God, just to keep the English old, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Now, this is a very important statement, but it's not really a commandment, but it at least implies that I am the one who is worthy of your adoration, your devotion, your belief, your commitment, because I brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. There's a literal meaning to that, and then there is the allegorical meaning of that I am the one who brings liberation from the bondage to the senses and to the thinking. I'm the one that brings enlightenment. So, viewed from that point of view, this first commandment is a guide that says, this is how evolution operates. It operates through and from me. And so, I'm the one that you turn to for guidance. And then the second one, which in the King James Version is broken out into two. In the King James Version, the second one in the Old Bible is 1 and 2 in the King James Version. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a graven image, a drawing or a sculpture or anything, nor any manner of likeness of anything that is in heaven above, that is in the earth below, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God. It's an interesting phrase. It's a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers, which means your ancestors, upon the children of the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, that do not follow my law, and showing mercy unto the 1,000th generation of them that love me and keep my commandments. I don't know how they got all of that on a tablet. It's part of the mystery of all of this teaching. But anyway, and then it goes on, you should not take the Lord of thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that takes his name in vain. And then remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And then there's an explanation that goes with that. Honor thy father and mother. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. Not to lie about others. And thou shalt not covet your neighbor's house, nor you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. I think that has been adapted quite a bit. But anyway, interesting set of rules that set out the basic guidelines. And it's a sin to break these rules. And if you sin, then God punishes you. So in the story of Job, Job's peers basically accuse him first of, that he must have done things wrong, either in his actions or in his thoughts. He must have sinned in some way. And when he says he hasn't, then they accuse him of, being arrogant and not being willing to even admit that he has sinned. Well, surely we have all sinned, and so we have debts to pay. to God, apparently, or just the whole way the universe operates, even if you don't want to put it in that kind of a religious context. This is how it works, and you have to pay for that. And when you look at the astrology, at least the Vedic astrology, and I think it's true in Western astrology and other forms of astrology, there are more malefics than benefics, more things that indicate that there will be suffering than things that indicate that there will be well-being and happiness and success. So in any lifetime, it looks like there is going to be some rain, some pain, some suffering. So how do we deal with that? It's been very interesting to me to look to see how we work all of that out. Now, the usual sense of karma coming back is we have to endure it. We have to live through it until the debt is paid. But sometimes that karma, it's like it's trying to teach us something. And indeed, viewing karma, viewing what comes to us that we don't like, should really be viewed as an opportunity to make amends and to change things. And so, what we're going to do, and particularly as we move now into the group clearing session here in just a few minutes, where we actually practice, is to look into our affliction and get a sense of what kind or quality of misdeed we may have engaged in. When I do this, I often get a very specific sense of what it was. And that can include things that we did, even curses that we gave or curses that were placed upon us due to actions that we had taken. Sometimes it involves other entities interacting with us that give us pain and suffering. A whole variety of ways in which we have to play this out. But we can change that suffering. And a great deal of my work, of course, is to relieve people of the suffering. But in doing so, I have to go back and deal with the karma, why this came about. And usually my guideline is I usually start sampling, what this problem is about, and whether I can just straightforwardly fix it. It's like going to the doctor and getting a prescription, and the doctor says, "Oh, you have this. Here's the prescription. You take the medicine, you'll be okay." And there's no real consideration of why you got sick. It just, maybe it was something like you went out in the weather without adequate clothing, which my granddaughter does all the time. Doesn't seem to bother her. But anyway, we'll see if that karma comes back to her. But and I'm just playing with this, but it's part of the reality of dealing with the karma. You do things and then we'll see what happens. So sometimes we play it out, or like in my work, then many times it's just dealing with the consequences of that. But more often, I have to go back and find that source, find the karma, find out what you have done in a particular this lifetime or in a past lifetime, or maybe in your family line, something that's come down to you. Remember that passage there from the Ten Commandments, about how it passes to generations, the karma, many generations even. Good karma can last for thousands of generations. Bad karma, at least several generations, and for the whole debt to be played out. One of the ways that we deal with karma is by prayer, and other, like tithing, giving charity, and by beseeching others to pray for us, and by in that beseeching, being very contrite. Oh, I have this suffering, and I'm sorry. It's made me aware that I've done things that were not good, and so I will be contrite about that and appeal for forgiveness if that seems warranted. And many times I help people make that appeal, sometimes on the silent level where they're not really aware of what's going on in their conscious thinking. Sometimes we do it out loud, so we're having a conversation about doing that. And then offering gratitude for this opportunity to set things right. And that's a big factor when I'm dealing, say, with curses. I had to deal with one the other day where somebody did not formally curse, but they were angry and resentful towards the person who had hurt them, and that was coming back on them. And what they were dealing with in this life was something that recreated that situation, and where they had to make, they had to deal with their own anger at another, because that anger wasn't actually solving the problem, and almost never does. And so, it's one of the ways I deal with curses is to help the person who makes the curse understand that they're hurting themselves as much as they're hurting the other person. And sometimes I just have to show them that, the curse has had its effect. And, now the person is contrite and is willing to, make amends and set things right. And so you can relax with that. You don't have to continue to hold the curse, because that also is held through lifetimes or generations. So it's a very, very powerful thing. And when I do that work, it's like amazing to me that all of this energy that is tied up can be released, and a person can go on then and feel free. And people often say, "Oh, I feel lighter, I feel free, I feel open, I feel I have energy once again." And sometimes I've worked with people, more than sometimes, I think it's fairly common, who feel really down, and like they'll say, "Oh, my whole life, like it's like, yeah, I've had good times, but there's always been, even in the background when I'm having, a good part of my life, in the background, there's this heaviness, this doubt, this shadow on my life." And so when they relieve that, then it's like, oh, that when I'm working with them, I often actually see them breathe. It's like they take a big breath or two or three. I can let go of that. I can release that karma. It's no longer a burden upon me. So that's the basic idea of managing karma. It's not something we have to endure until it's done. We do have to finish it, but we can speed that whole process up. We can have Vedic performances done. There are other ways of doing it: prayer and group prayer and yagyas and just all kinds of things that people do that bring relief to that. And then we can do the inner work of identifying what the problem is. That's my role, is to help people do that inner work, find that source of that problem, and then make amends for that, with contrition and, when appropriate, an appeal for forgiveness. Very, very gratifying work, very magical. So I'm going to stop here, see if there are any questions. And if you do, please put them in the chat. That'll be fine. There is a Q&A, question and answer. You can use that too, but it's easier to do it in the chat. And let me just see if anything has shown up. Thank you. I need to scroll. Here we go. So I got this question, and this is a very fundamental question. How does repentance influence karma? The answer is favorably. Penance, if you mean self-inflicted suffering to pay your debt, not so much from my experience. not a really good way of going about it. Um, it's basically a self-serving process. I'm miserable. I should be miserable. I deserve to be miserable. Surely I deserve to be miserable. Otherwise, I wouldn't be suffering like this. So I must be bad in some way or have been bad in some way. And so I deserve this. And that kind of becomes self-perpetuating. It doesn't really bring about resolution. Forgiveness is valuable. It's very important, but not absolutely essential. What's really essential is the contrition, the admitting that I am taking responsibility for what you have done in the past. And so, like when we're in the group clearing session here, we're going to hopefully get some sense of something that we have done. That is what kind of thing that was, what kind of energy that was. Maybe I was angry, maybe I cursed God, maybe I turned my back on God. I denied the, that there is this intelligence in nature that, basically created me and runs my life, and that brought me out of the land of Egypt, out of bondage, or at least could bring me out of bondage if I pay attention. So I hope that answers the question. The thing about asking for forgiveness is that it's part of a dynamic. Now, a person may not forgive you, but then that becomes their karma. So the dynamic of forgiveness is a twofold process. It's like I offer contrition, I offer, responsibility. I take responsibility for what I did. And then, you know, if you will forgive me, that will help me release my burden. It also helps you release your burden. Now, you can't say that to somebody when you ask for forgiveness, but sometimes I play mediator and I sort of, if they don't get it, I kind of encourage them to understand, that if you forgive somebody, then you release from your burden, your suffering, that you went through, so that the energy of that whole interaction clears up. That's really a nice thing. It's a very, very beautiful question. There's a word here that I can't quite figure out what you meant to type. Quesutibs. Oh, there, I see you retyped it. Questions was the word. Thank you. Give me a moment. Um, all health issues are tied to karma. Now, like maybe a karma to learn a lesson, but it more often is karma of some violation of natural law. And so, I have to look into what that was in order to clear the karma so that the healing can take place. So I kind of go back and forth. I think is my experience with most people is I'll do a little work on the body or the emotions or spiritual, whatever. And then look at the karma and then come back to the, more this lifetime kind of thing, and then go back to the karma. I tend to speak of karma as coming from past lifetimes. It can come from this lifetime, but karma is a kind of energy, you might say, that rolls along. And so, it can come through multiple lifetimes. Um, and then you get to this situation where, oh my, now we have an opportunity to actually change the karma, actually resolve this issue. I'm going to pop into the Q&A here. So the question, I'll read the question because it's kind of multifaceted. When does karma begin in an evolutionary sense, i.e., like as a monkey or some insect? Do we get born backwards into animal kingdom as punishment? Well, first, I'd like to address the last word. Um, in terms of working with these things, I don't think treating it as punishment is terribly useful. Um, because I'm not God. And God may punish, but I don't. So what I'm seeing is a consequence of having engaged in certain activities or holding certain thoughts, and then working to deal with that in the present about the past. That is the energy that's come down to us into this present time. Because in truth, we can only work in the present, but the energy may have come from generations or lifetimes in the past. In terms of evolution, I've never really asked that question. I don't think, for instance, that would be my suspicion based on experience, that I don't think insects would be able to carry heavy karma forward, because insects work on instinct. Let's try to say those two words correctly. And so their behaviors are very automatic. When you get into the higher animals, like a monkey, then they have a certain level of volition, choice. So much of their behavior is instinctual, but there's also a great deal of social learning that takes place. And then there's all the environmental factors, availability of food, territory, mates, and so on. And so all of those things can have impacts. So for instance, we may have the karma of misery from, as a monkey, of maybe been ostracized or something, or beaten up by the other monkeys, or maybe permanently bullied by other monkeys. And so we may bring that karma forward. Whether we can bring that forward into an adult incarnation, I don't know. I've never asked the question. I probably should. It's a very good question. So anyway, I think you've got the answer to that. So the question comes up about group practice of meditation or prayer or any of these other things that groups of people participate in for the benefit of either an individual or a group of individuals, or the well-being of the whole community. And obviously, those things have very powerful effects. Our meditation has a very beneficial effect. And many times, when you particularly do a lot of meditation, you get a pretty clear sense you're paying off some old debts. You're paying off for some bad behavior from somewhere back. And, diving in and transcending and then coming back into activity, helps to purify that, helps to relieve that karma. And part of that is, if you're like doing transcendental meditation, experiencing that transcendental field, that karma has a chance to, so to speak, wash past you, is a nice way to think of that. It's like you may have some sense of it. You may even have quite an intense experience, but then it's gone. It washes past you. So it does accelerate that process and relieve, the karmic burden, the debt, as you. Okay. I'm going to draw this part to a conclusion, and we'll move on to the group clearing session.